Hey friends, Christy here with Little Roots Ranch, and today I wanted to talk about overwintering strawberries. Now, hopefully you have been enjoying amazing, delicious strawberries all summer. For me, I have been completely blown away with the production. I don't know if I'm saying it right, but the Albanon strawberries, and they have produced from June until now. I'm still picking strawberries, even though it's chilly outside. But anyways, you might be wondering, how do you take care of your strawberry plants through the winter? And so that's what today's video is about. So one thing, or a couple things I wanted to say in advance is that I'll be listing two different styles or two different things kind of, because they're in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously there's Western Washington where I am and Eastern Washington, and then of course the same thing with Oregon and then Northern California. And so, but specifically with Oregon and Washington is the temperature, average temperatures from the east side and the west side, or before the mountains and after the mountains, is night and day. And so Eastern Washington gets way colder than Western Washington in the winter, and they get way warmer in the summer. And so and that's the same for Oregon and stuff like that. And I'm not 100% sure on Northern California. I think they're more like Western Washington and Oregon. So I'll talk about both of those. The other thing is the temperatures have been changing a little bit. So in regards to Western Washington or Western Oregon, historically, I have not done anything with my strawberries. I just leave them outside without any mulch or anything like that, and I don't have any problems. And even last year, we got down to, 8 degrees? Last year was crazy. I hope we do not have a winter like last winter. But I've noticed over the years, we've been getting more incidences of snow, and it's been colder, and so I think it's time to be a little more proactive, just because apparently it can be 8 degrees for a week in Western Washington. I know Eastern Washington is used to that, and Eastern Oregon, but for Western Washington, we're not like used to that. So fast forwarding a little bit, so strawberries are actually really winter hardy. I know that because they're a fruit, that sounds counterintuitive, but there is something to clarify. The shoots are very hardy. The roots are not hardy at all. And I'm going to get into that a little bit later when I talk about overwintering strawberries in pots. So that is coming up, but first I'm going to talk about strawberries in the ground. And I have strawberries inside and outside of the greenhouse. Obviously, the greenhouse provides some protection just in itself. But anyways, so the shoots are definitely winter hardy, but the roots are not. And so if you're growing in the ground, you do have some of the ground protection, whether you're eastern, western side of your state. And strawberries can handle up to like low 20s. Generally, last year I did have, obviously it was 8 degrees. I didn't provide any protection for them. There was a little bit of grass overgrown, so that might have helped. But they all pulled through fine. Perhaps production could have been better. That was in some areas, but they generally are fine until the low 20s. And so historically, I haven't had to worry about anything like that. But as the weather has gotten a little more unpredictable, I'd rather be safe than sorry. Now, if you're thinking about mulching your strawberries, you might be thinking, ooh, it's been so cold in the morning or cold in the evening. Is now time? And the answer is no. And you're like, what if our first frost is coming up? The answer is still no. So one of the key things about overwintering strawberries and when to mulch is that you need to have them to have time to harden off. And what I mean by that is you want to wait till you have a couple days after a few frosts or several frosts, depending on your climate. And you want to wait till definitely before the ground freezes, if your ground freezes. But you want to have where they acclimate to, because they have their plant antifreeze, which are all the sugars that they put into the roots to help keep them warm. And so generally, like when there's like 3 to 4 consecutive days of like high 20s, that's when, and you're expecting colder weather, that's when you want to put your mulch down. And you might be wondering, why, like, how does the mulch work? Besides being, of course, a blanket and insulating from the warmer earth, warmer than the air, of course. But also, and this is pretty interesting, when the little like droplets of moisture freeze on all the different surfaces of, say, like pine needles, straw, whatever, I'll get into that too, it actually releases like the teeniest little amount of heat, and that's enough to help keep the strawberries warm. It's not going to provide, summer conditions or anything like that, but it's enough to help them get through the winter. Now, what you don't want to do is do this too early, meaning that it's going to be 34 degrees and you're covering up the strawberries, because you want them to go into that dormant. Any crop that survives cold weather has to go into dormancy to kind of just ignore the world for a little bit. How convenient. But just ignore the world for a little bit and come out on the other end. And so you need the plant to be able to do that. And that's why we don't cover right away as soon as it starts to get a little bit cold, or whatever. You definitely want to make sure that you are not covering up a growing plant or a living plant. I guess it's always living, but you know what I mean. And then also the caveat to that is you want to uncover it in the spring as well. You don't want to leave it covered with any type of mulch that you use, because then it won't be able to grow. You also want to make sure that you're not, well, I guess that's more for potted plants. I'll get to that in a second. So when we're talking about mulch materials, you may be thinking, well, what type of mulch do I use? The answer is it depends on a few things. One, your size, and also your comfortability with things. I know a lot of folks who swear by hay. And hay is a great option, but generally hay is going to have a lot of seed heads. And so then you'll be dealing with weeds the following year. And a lot of folks like straw as an alternative. And the straw could be like oat or barley or rye or whatever. And they have generally a lot less seed heads. Some people say that they got a lot of weeds from straw. And some people say they've had no problem. But also generally straw is terminated, unless it's organic. Straw is terminated with a pesticide usually, or not pesticide, what is it? Maybe it's a pesticide or herbicide. Herbicide, there we go. Usually, depending, especially like large scale, like farms that have like 100,000 acres or whatever, growing like oats or whatever, is usually terminated with was it paraquat? Something like that. And so that might be like, that's something that I personally struggle with. Like I do use straw, but I'm wanting to get away from straw. And so I want to look into like organic alternatives that function like straw, but that aren't generally terminated by herbicides. And then if you have a really small garden, like, cardboard is a really great option. I've seen people use coffee bags, or, what's a really good option is pine needles, and they'll help acidify the ground a little bit, the soil. But pine needles are excellent. A lot of folks want to use leaf mulch, and leaf mulch is an excellent idea. The only thing is you want to be careful that you're either going to remove it with enough time in the spring, or you want to shred the leaves. And the reason why, if you've ever used leaf mulch in the past, that those leaves, I swear, could hold like beluga whale. I don't know what it is, but it's something about when the leaves are all flat and they get wet, and they will completely, it's like plastic almost. They completely cut out everything below from like sunlight or anything growing through it or whatever. So the alternative to that is to shred the leaves, so that way it's not so hard. Now, you are going to be lifting this mulch in the spring, so it may not make as big of a deal, but just keep that in mind if that's something you're using. And there's other stuff I've heard of folks using wool if you have sheep, for instance, or live near a sheepery and they have, you know, just wool galore. Or, corn stalks ground up like through a wood chipper work really great if you have like a little corn maze or whatever on your property, or a big corn patch, or it depends on what you have available to you and what fits the size and needs of your garden. The main part is that you want to put it between 3 and 6 inches deep. And that way, and covering, you know, of course, the plants and the bare soil around it. And so if you have any, because strawberries are pretty aggressive. I had a lot of space around my strawberries, and so I'll have to thin them. My strawberries that's a tomatillo plant that's growing out of control over there. But the darker green color back there, well, that's thistle, but that I'm organically growing. But right behind it and the whole row down is my strawberries. But the main point being is that you want to take your mulch and put it down like 3 to 6 inches and make sure you remove it. Don't put it too early and don't leave it on too long. Because what you don't want to do is have where the plant is still alive and still growing, or at least like doing all of its functions, and then it doesn't have sunlight, so it's going to send off those tender shoots trying to search for the sunlight. But they're going to be weak because they're sun starved, and then they're going to be more susceptible to like freezing injury or, you know, diseases or any of that. There's like black root rot and all that stuff. So don't put your mulch on too early. Don't have it on too late. Now, if you are a potted plant gardener, or you just happen to have your strawberries in a pot or whatever, it's even more important to think about keeping your strawberry plants warm in the winter, because the thing about pots, and this is a benefit and good and bad depending on what plant and what season, but in the winter, the whole like pot of soil can be just as cold as ambient air, which of course is colder than the ground. And so you want to be careful about that, because you don't want to freeze the roots, of course, you know. And then once the crown, which is the little part, there's like the roots and the crown is right before everything goes out of it. That's what you want buried halfway when you transplant it. If the crown or the roots freeze or whatever, and it's enough damage, then your plant will die. So that means that you need to take extra care in insulating not only the top, but also the pot. You also want to think about like how the wind, this is also in the ground, but how the wind is going to affect it. Because the wind will just bring that chill all the way through and dry out, especially if you have like a terracotta pot or anything like that. So, you know, you might want to put like a couple boxes and cut out the bottom and put around it, and put some of any insulating thing in there and just protect it. Now, one thing I want to tell you that you don't want to do is you don't want extreme changes in temperatures. And what I mean by that is, and I notice this more when gardeners have potted plants and we're going to have a cold snap. It sounds easier to bring, like if you have one pot with like 3 strawberry plants that you really love, like, oh, I'll bring it in, we're expected to be 8 degrees or whatever. But that's kind of the worst thing that you can do, because the plant needs to slowly go into dormancy, stay in dormancy, and then slowly go out of dormancy. And that's obviously fall into winter into spring. Now, if you change that up overnight, especially if you're going inside your house, it may be not even spring, it would be like summer to the plant, and then it's going back out to winter. You're going to get where it's initiating that growth, and you're going to get those weak shoots that are going to be more susceptible to damage and disease and all that stuff. And it's just not right. So if you do bring your plants in, you kind of want to commit to that, to having them in. The garage is a better option because it's as long as it's not a heated garage. But even still, you know, you want your plants they're made to kind of survive through the winter and deal with those ebbs and flows. And so if you're bringing them inside, which is easier to do when they're portable, then you might actually be doing more harm than it's worth. Obviously you are always free to do whatever you want. This is just my experience and things that I've like learned or seen or whatever. But, you know, but yeah, so that's kind of the basics of overwintering strawberries. The bottom line is that they're really cold hardy, especially the shoots, which are like the leaves and all that stuff. The crown and the root are sensitive, and that starts to happen around low 20s. If you're going to be colder than that, then you might choose to put some mulch on there, whatever mulch is your favorite, at least 3 inches, but anywhere from 3 to 6 inches. If you're watching this and you live in a different part of the world, like Michigan, you probably need more mulch than that. I'm not 100% sure. Let nature do its thing, and then make sure to remove that mulch in the spring. Like I said, historically, I have not done anything with my strawberry plants, and it hasn't been a problem. But the weather's gotten a little wilder lately in the last, 2 years especially. And so, I think I'm gonna, the strawberries in the greenhouse I'll probably leave because I have the greenhouse. But the strawberries outside, I think I'm gonna add a little bit of mulch too. I'm probably gonna go with straw. I think I'm more against the straw. I don't know. I have a mixed relationship with straw. I think I need to find a really good supplier of straw. Historically, I've just purchased it from our farm store, our local farm store, country store if you guys are local. But I meant to do this earlier in the year, but I want to find an organic grower. But yeah, anyways, if you've made it this far, thank you so much for watching. Go ahead and drop a like on the video if you found it helpful. And don't hit don't like if you did it. No, I'm kidding. But thank you so much for watching. I hope you and your strawberry plants have the best winter. Hopefully it's not so cold as last year ever again. And thanks for watching. Happy gardening. Bye.